If anyone can hear us, comment. We're experimenting here.
It's not appearing on my phone.
There we go. There's something happening. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Bit of a delay. Okay, so we have Robert King with us. Okay, I might as well do the intro. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to do the intro. We have Robert King here with us at WorldView. Robert King, you are a member of the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. What precisely is your title again?
Executive committee member at the CIAG. Thanks very much for having me on the show.
So, Robert, what was your trip to Orania like? What made this all happen? Why did you go to Orania?
Well, look, I'm in connection to being a member of the CIAG. I'm also a member of the Freedom Front Plus, and which is quite surprising considering I'm not Afrikaans. But the party has done a very good job at expanding into other groups in the Western Cape. And my main reason for supporting the party is because of their pro-independence stance. But there was a summit going on in Orania that I was invited to, and most of the provinces were represented there. So unfortunately, it's a very unique town, one of the best examples of a self-determination project in South Africa. So I decided, to take the opportunity as I had it. And it really is a remarkable town. I mean, they are really trying to be independent from the national government in every way possible. I mean, they're not part of the local municipality. They've got their own distinct legal structure there, which is unique in South Africa. They're in the moment, and they're in the process of generating their own electricity with the aim of being completely electricity independent within the next 5 years.
Do you have reduced load shedding there, like in Cape Town, like -1, -2?
I think so. Look, it was hard to say when I was in Orania because I don't think there was that much load shedding over that weekend. But I didn't experience it while I was there. I mean, there was I think there was maybe at one point where there was load shedding, but either their backup energy system came up online or there was generators that came up online, so we didn't experience it. And luckily, it didn't disrupt the rugby because it would have been quite annoying if it did.
You watch rugby?
Yeah, there was the Wales South Africa game going on.
Yeah, but so I mean, do you enjoy rugby? Do you watch it?
I enjoy rugby, of course. It's well, especially for social purposes. It's always nice to go to the local bar and watch rugby on a Saturday afternoon.
Now we have two Roberts.
Yes.
Hey, so Robert Duigan. I got your surname correct. Yeah. So Robert Duigan, it's nice to have you on WorldView. We're live now, and I'm experimenting with this, but I'm sure it will be great. Robert, okay. Duigan and King. I think that's the best way to do this. Duigan and King.
Yes.
Duigan, what's your? You work for AfriForum?
Yeah, I do. I'm a researcher for them.
And that's the only thing you're doing at the moment in terms of a profession.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I just wanted to introduce you. Okay, sorry, King, you can continue with your story on Orania.
Yes, no, it was, as I said, it's fascinating all the ways they're becoming independent from the national government. And it really, look, it's controversial, obviously, because of its cultural focus. But it is a model that works at the same time. It's a very successful community. And I think, when we look at the future of South Africa, I mean, there's not going to be one model that dominates. I mean, you're going to see a large variety of communities forming in the chaos that is likely to come. And some of those will be, cosmopolitan cities like Cape Town, I think will likely thrive. And then you're also going to see, cultural communities develop and grow as well. And I think that's a very positive thing. I don't think we should destroy the cultural diversity we have in this country. I think we need to embrace it. And by embracing it, it does require some, a variety of communities to form.
And okay, so did you see signs of improvement and that Orania is growing? That this is something that's really taking off because that's what they're selling. And this is the thing. Everyone is coming to Orania.
Well, I mean, I was invited to speak there as well. And actually, if I remember correctly, they had, last year they had a 10% growth. And the year before that, they had a 32% growth in population. So it really is quite rapid, and it's at the point where they actually don't have enough labor to do the construction required for new housing demand. It's it's that intense. So I mean, the thing is, it's a flipping small town, and so the expansions that they're planning, they're actually, fortunately they're getting on this early. But when I was invited to speak over there, one of the people that they invited was an architect who looked at town planning from a new urbanist perspective, in terms of mixed use developments, and basically all of that stuff that Leon Krier has been pushing for a while, and so they're quite thoughtful about this. But it's very real. They do have a labor shortage, but then that's kind of to be expected. I mean, for nigh on 100 years, South Africa has been dependent on cheap African labor, and so there is slightly sort of a deficit in the white community for lower end labor capacity, and it is showing up in the economic structure.
But what is?
I mean, it is also it's. It's a village that's aiming to be a city at the end of the day. I mean, the growth rate I think for last year was 16%, and they were telling us Orania has been around for the last 30 years, and if it continues at the current growth rate it's got for another 30 years, then they're looking at a population size that's about 200,000 people, which is about 100 times larger than what they've currently got.
But how does that work?
That's what the
how does Orania become 200,000 people?
Yeah,
well, look,
I mean, I think
there's a point I think where the growth will start slowing, but it just goes to show how rapidly it's growing and what their expectations are in the future. It's not going to be a community that's in the few thousands; it's going to be in the tens of thousands, maybe even more.
Duigan?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing to bear in mind with all of these things is any kind of organic growth process fits onto a sigmoid curve. So it's hard to tell exactly what point in the growth trajectory they're at. I would say they're starting to hit the acceleration point in the lowest end of the curve, if I was to judge by how far they've grown now. So the last 30 years has been that sort of flat little sliver before you hit the major climb. And I think they're a very long way from leveling off in terms of growth. The real question is whether that will be interrupted by economic overheating, or whether they'll be able to convert that into more sustainable manufacturing and construction patterns. And then again, they're going to suffer, like most rapid growth economies, they're going to suffer a shock once the construction demand has been sated, and they're going to have to convert all of those people into other competencies, which is going to be painful. But if things work out, they'll probably be able to swallow that.
What is the Vryheidsfront trying to sell with Orania? Like, why are they selling Orania? In terms of, do they want Orania to grow, or do they want more Oranias?
I think both. I mean, what would you say?
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think they really want to promote self-determination in general. So whether that means Orania growing, more Oranias forming, obviously Cape Secession comes into that equation as well. I mean, I think that's the whole point of the Freedom Front Plus now at this point, is to be the political party vehicle to advance the issue of self-determination in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it's let me just think if I can find this. So, I mean, I wrote a piece for AfriForum just now. Hold on. I'll share it in the chat over here. But I wrote this paper called "Against the Union," and basically the point is that the what's it called? The whole problem with South Africa is that there is no sort of natural cultural center. It's a purely sort of constructed entity that are entirely built around extracting mineral resources from the mining sectors up north. And so it's about binding that mineral industrial sector to the ports in the Cape and Durban. More Durban now than the Cape, although Saldanha and Richards Bay are still big deals. But there is no overarching ethnic dominant group anymore. The Afrikaners tried it, but I mean they came under enormous international pressure, and then from below you also have the problem that because during apartheid you saw a radical reduction, well, not a radical reduction, but actually a sustained incremental reduction, rather would be a better way to characterize it. There's a sustained incremental reduction in economic inequality. So you got a big growth in the black working class and a tiny emerging black middle class, especially towards the 70s and 80s, and their ability to control that emerging labor force, especially in the 1970s, hit an absolute brick wall. And after the Vian report in 74, I think it was, there was a lot of internal discussion, and by 77 they'd already realized that you can't Afrikaansify the country, and the Afrikaners that they relied on for their support, they couldn't actually make the sacrifices required to give the Bantustans independence, because that would mean eating up big chunks of white South Africa in order to create these contiguous economic cultural unities that could survive on their own. And so you reach this real sort of ugly realization after a point that South Africa as a political entity cannot survive without destroying or dominating some ethnic element within it, and it's inevitable. It began as the subjugation of the Afrikaners, continued as the subjugation of black people in general, and is now emerging as a sort of universal subjugation where a tiny emergent rootless black cosmopolitan group, which the philosopher, I forget his first name, his surname is Gobeni, from the 1970s, referred to them as the New Africans, which is Africans of various backgrounds who've been transformed through contact with the white economy and have lost their institutional roots. So they form this new sort of ethnic mix. They're dominating now amongst the elite, but they again don't have any sort of deep cultural roots or substance to go on with. And what they do is they ruthlessly undermine the traditional governance structures in rural areas. They're discriminating against all racial minorities as well, and it's all to maintain this very sort of synthetic central political economy that's required to sustain that mineral industrial complex.
And you think that would be true under a federal or a confederal system as well?
Yeah, I mean that's why everyone's resisting it, because there's no major power that has serious interest in doing anything for ordinary South Africans that would benefit them. There just isn't one, and I know that a lot of people who I work with don't like me speaking as bluntly about the DA, but they have no interest in delivering federalism. And I think the proof is in the pudding. They've had it on their manifesto for nearly 20 years. They haven't lifted a single finger to devolve any powers until Jordan Hill Lewis got control of Cape Town. And even then, it's like, piecemeal stuff. Like, maybe they'll get a few extra municipal police in the metro cops. Or
Duigan, they've taken control of the cemeteries now. So
really
alarmed.
But I mean, it's staggering because they're saying, oh, well, we can't do anything about federalism because, we're not in central government. We have no control. The ANC would block us. But the reality is, I mean, look, I've just spent 2 months with my head buried in legal documents and the Constitution and all kinds of stuff. They've got enormous powers to devolve various sectors of the government. Sweetie, you on camera now. Okay. Anyhow, so anyhow, the sorry.
She's very beautiful.
Thank you. I'm sure she'll be glad to hear that. Because you still got the those sort of like moisturizing stickers that you put on your face when you're taking a bath. Anyhow, where was I? Oh yeah, so I've been busy on this report on like the capacity for devolving power. I mean, there's all kinds of creative shit that the DA could have done. Take for example schooling. So they've got no control over the public schooling very, very much. I mean, you look at that bill and it's like, here are the areas where the minister has exclusive control. And it's like this huge laundry list that covers anything of importance. On the other hand, they have the power to fund private schools, dictate exactly what the private schools are going to do with that funding, and the private schools are actually forbidden from racial discrimination in an absolute sense by legislature, which means that they actually cannot have BEE in any school admissions policy in a private school. So the DA could have actually completely revamped, like decades ago, they could have completely revamped the entire Western Cape education system. I mean, the same goes for the police. They have the power to actually institute a municipal level run police force that spans the entire province, but they don't do it. So, like, and here's the thing: they could, we don't have control of the budget. Well, the reality is that any function that is devolved to the provincial level, the national government is mandated to provide the funds for it. So if they gain control of any kind of function over, which is formally a government function, a national function, the government has to back it in the annual budget. So there's just literally no argument that they really have for doing nothing and sitting on their hands for 2 decades, except for the fact that their plan, as has been revealed recently, all along was build up to 25%. Wait for the ANC to collapse, then form a coalition with them, an international government. I mean, it's why the Brenthurst Foundation, which is the main think tank for the Oppenheimer family's mining interest, has been backing this kind of thing, and the Oppenheimer family have been dumping millions into the DA coffers. I mean, look, leadership over there will insist it has no impact on them. Like, you gave us 15 million and it occupies a giant portion of our funding, but of course they have no influence whatsoever. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. It's but the silliest part about this is not so much the skullduggery; it's more that there's no chance of success. I mean, who is their? They sort of have this idea that Ramaphosa was the reasonable wing of the ANC. I mean, anyone who's watched his shenanigans for the past couple of years can realize it's nonsense. You can't call Ramaphosa's group reasonable. They're people who lie through their teeth, have no principles, and steal at a rate that makes Jacob Zuma look like a DA member. I mean, the only thing that the DA really has going for them is more that they don't steal everything that isn't nailed down. They're competent because they hire people in a very ordinary way according to their basic skills and a bit of political allegiance, and they don't steal everything. Now, those are huge things in their favor, but it means that they're governing at sort of like parity for what you'd expect, given the Human Development Index for the Western Cape, and it's really very sad because they could, this whole place could be doing so much better if they really cared about the Western Cape, who've been loyal to them for 20 odd years, in more ways than one. And I think it's just extremely depressing. But
the people of the Western Cape are waking up to this. I mean, they're voting for the Good Party.
Yeah, that's not waking up. Voting for the Good Party is a sign of brain disease. The Good Party is literally a part of the ANC. Patricia de Lille is a cabinet minister. I mean, anyone who votes for the Good Party is a Category A idiot. There's no other way to gloss over it. There's just no other way.
Or it can be a Category B idiot as well. King, you want to...
Well, look, I mean, the Good Party was incredibly hypocritical leading up into the local elections, because I remember Brett Herron tweeting a graphic that warned that the DA would get into bed with the ANC after the local government elections, completely oblivious to the fact that they've got a minister in the current cabinet. But, it was apparently...
Well, he's not oblivious. He's just a liar.
ANC.
Hmm.
Yeah, but
he's not oblivious. He's just like, But I mean, it's also that the
it's
DA has
that's
had no
expected.
plans to go into bed with the ANC at the local level. Their plan for years now has been to go in with the ANC at the national level. Because, I mean, look, Helen's had actually outlined this like really, really clearly. There was a conference she did with Biz News a while back. I'm trying to remember the title of it. I think it's called the battle. Yeah, it's called The Battle for the Soul of South Africa. That's the title. So if you look it up on YouTube, you'll see it. And she outlines this plan where 2024 comes around, ANC dips below 50%. And there's two ways that can end up. One, they go into coalition with the EFF, or two, they go into coalition with the DA. And then for some reason, she decides that she can't bring herself to say, our plan is to go into coalition with the ANC. Instead, she says, under no circumstances can they be allowed to go into coalition with the EFF, and then leaves everyone to fill in the blanks. So, I mean, I'm struggling to see how there's any way of interpreting. I mean, she got very angry at me because we had a very cordial conversation at the beginning of this year where I tried to convince her not to do this and to back Cape independence. And she immediately came out with, that the ANC, that this would result in civil war, which I think, it's absurd, because I've had a look at, if anyone has watched what happened last year in KZN, it's impossible. First of all, the ANC, there's only two forces that could possibly wage war against the Western Cape. Number one is the ANC, and number two is the state. The ANC can't get anyone together to protest in this part of the country, as last year showed. And second of all, they don't even have enough to pull together a provincial conference anymore. They've got nothing here. And in terms of the state has demonstrated that they cannot even feed and water their troops for 2 weeks on an internal urban deployment after the rioting has fucking gone down. So the state is so completely impotent that the only thing that you really require in order to flout the laws of the South African government is a pair of testicles. And frankly, I mean, it just shows how short supply that stuff is. I don't know.
You can buy it. Testicles.
Can buy what? No, you can't buy testicles.
Okay. But okay.
You can buy sheep testicles, which I hear are good if deep fried, but I couldn't attest to that.
King, you were interrupted.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Look, I forgot what the point I was going on about, but yeah, I mean, look, it's unclear what the DA position really now is on the ANC coalition, because they've actually proven to be completely lying about the topic. After this Fala gate broke, Helen Zille came out with a tweet and said, we were considering a coalition with the ANC, and now we're not. But obviously they've been lying about that for months before that tweet, and we don't know if they're lying months afterwards. So it's a very unclear situation we're in right now. But the only thing that's really clear is that for the Western Cape, the only safe political option for us is Cape independence. I mean, the most likely outcome after the next elections, if it isn't an ANC-DA coalition, which would be a disaster, as Rob's pointed out in the past, is an ANC-EFF coalition. And even in the last local elections, which everyone held as a massive victory in the fight against the ANC, I mean, the ANC and EFF together nationwide got 56% of the vote. And this multi-party opposition alliance that everyone's so optimistic about got 34% of the vote. So there's still a massive gap between those two coalitions. And, I can't, and considering in often the national elections after local elections, that the governing party actually improves on its performance, I'm not confident at all that those two parties are going to go under 50% of the vote.
Okay, gentlemen, you gave us the solution, Cape independence. So what do we do? How do we achieve it? What needs to be done? What do you think is lacking still to achieve Cape independence?
There's literally only one thing that's in the way, and that's the DA. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, as I outlined, the ANC doesn't really have a way to stop that in practical terms. But let's say you don't want to be the kind of guy who's breaking laws and violating the Constitution. You want to do things in a legal way. Well, there's a way to do it. You write a provincial bill that declares that recognizes the Cape's inherently different cultural and communal character. And that will establish under several treaties that the ANC has ratified as leaders of the government in defense of self-determination. So that gives us the right to self-determination. Once you have the right to self-determination, you can demand pretty much any powers you want back from the national government. If they don't give it to you and refuse to and put absurd conditions on you achieving them, then you have the right to secede using something called remedial secession. So under international law, there's a fairly firm basis for all of this. And then all you need to do is build the legitimacy for it locally. I mean, what I find really peculiar about a lot of the arguments that people put forward for, against Cape independence is they'll say, oh, well, there's lots of people who don't want Cape independence. I mean, look, we know that most people who want Cape independence are DA voters. They don't want to vote for another party because they're scared of the DA losing and them getting some kind of charterist monstrosity. So, the real sort of obstacle here is not so much the support. It's like convincing the remainder to go over. And the funny thing for me is that, you've got DA members who and DA supporters who really think that the DA can convert the entire country of, National Socialists, tribalists, communists into English liberals. And I find that to be the most profoundly absurd proposition that I've ever heard any serious political party or political thinker ever float. And so, the only way that the DA will be able to maintain control of the government for any serious period of time, for even a single electoral cycle, is if they abandon all their liberal principles completely. And then what's the point of voting for them as a minority? You're just going to get another ANC. So either they completely get rid of all of their values, or they just don't make it. And the reality is, if they go into coalition with the ANC, they're going to be a junior partner, because anytime they push something the ANC doesn't like, the ANC can go, hang on, guys, look, we don't really want to do this. And if you want to play hardball, we've always got the EFF waiting in the wings, and we can just do them, I just think the levels of insanity that are required to entertain the idea that South Africa is a sustainable, multicultural, liberal democracy. I cannot understand it. I can't. I mean, if you look at it seriously for 5 minutes, it's a transparent fallacy.
King? What's the system?
Yeah, I mean,
how do we achieve Cape independence?
South Africa's a very... Well, look, I mean, I agree with Rob's point completely, but another important point is also get feet on the ground, the troops on the ground pushing this forward as well. I mean, that has been something that we've been lacking for a long period of time. We've had a very good, strategy with the CIG and Cape Exit to getting the mandates and getting the political players to discussing the topic. But at the same time, we need the people on the ground going into communities campaigning for this as well. And that is something that I think we will start to be seeing in the next few months. We've got actually Rob and I are working on a project at the moment to boost youth involvement in Cape independence as well, building an activist base of young Cape independence supporters. And we should be getting some awareness events on some of the university campuses within the next few weeks on that. But I think one of the important things is getting more people to be active in the independence movement and making sure that we've got activists that can help us in election campaigns, getting the word out, and eventually in a referendum campaign as well.
I would just advise Chris Wyatt in the comments. I think it's better that he plans his South African trip than spending too much time in the comments. But yes, Duigan.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Wyatt is. If you don't know who he is, he's a very senior retired American military officer, and he is very well acquainted with Southern Africa as an area. He speaks several native languages, and he speaks several European languages, and he's very well acquainted with this part of the world. So. I think I think his comments are not to be taken lightly, at the very least.
Yeah, Duigan, you've not. I don't. I'm a very sarcastic person. I
All
know,
right.
Chris.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Good. Sorry, I can be a bit, literal minded sometimes.
Okay, but do you guys don't you think another political party is part of the solution, right? Because I think to a certain degree, people don't feel comfortable placing their DA votes with another party that just supports independence. The other parties are too focused on minor issues, like the Cape Colored Congress might be focused on colored issues, or the Vryheidsfront Plus focuses on Afrikaans issues. Then there's sort of this middle way that they don't really feel comfortable placing their votes with these parties. Shouldn't we need another party in the Western Cape that just expressly focuses on Cape independence?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think the thing is that there is a lot. I mean, I think the majority of people in the Cape don't like sectional race politics. And I think that's people of all persuasions. I think that's kind of part of what makes the Cape a bit different is the desire to get away from race nationalism is felt across racial boundaries. It's the only place where that's true. And so, yeah, there's a lot of gap for that. I think the real thing is that one has to realize that again, not a lot of people, even if they support Cape independence, are willing to risk ducking out of the DA. But I mean, the DA is also hemorrhaging support in the Western Cape. So at one point they were I think over 70% of the vote, and now they're just bumping up above 50% by a couple of digits, and that's dangerous territory because there's a non-zero chance that in 2024, even if nothing changes, even if there's no new parties on the horizon, that they're going to fall below 50% and have to go into coalition. I mean, they're probably going to pick Vryheidsfront Plus because, they're a fairly reliable lot that don't do anything brash, and they're not sort of known for skullduggery, but they're still going to have to go into coalition, and it's any sort of really good entrepreneurial party who's capable of scraping together the funds and capable of canvassing just even decently. They don't have to work a miracle. They just have to do some decent canvassing. They could steal between 5 and 10% of the election at a provincial level if they really try, and that would immediately force the DA to play ball on Cape independence because they would have no choice. Because then you'd have three pro-independence parties that constitute a block of nearly 20% of the vote with which the DA is going to have to do business. And then it comes down to, can we get the referendum done in a reasonable time frame? So that's really what my answer to the whole party question.
King?
Oh, no, I would agree with that as well. I mean, look, we do need a party that can appeal to a lot of the parties are relatively conservative orientated, and you do need a party that can appeal to the liberal majority in the Cape. But I think if you look at the election results as well, you definitely see quite a divergence between the interior of the Western Cape and Cape Town. In Cape Town, the Freedom Front Plus, for example, only got about 1 or 2% of the vote. And then in the rest of the province, they were getting, in places like my municipality, 8% of the vote. In the Lungeberg municipality, they got about 10% of the vote, and Oudtshoorn, they got 12% of the vote. So clearly, there is a big split there politically between those two areas. And I think if we look at the polling results from the CIAG, I think from both 2020 and 2021, I think there's between 15 and 20% of respondents who said they would be less likely to support the DA if they took a anti-independence position. So you're talking about 10% of the electorate that would be open to supporting a pro-independence party there. So yes, it comes into line with what Rob says, and you really do need basically a political party that can appeal to every major demographic in the Western Cape. And the Freedom Front Plus has their demographics that they really appeal to, which is Afrikaans voters and increasingly voters. And then we've got the Cape Coloured Congress that does very well in urban coloured areas. And then you've got the Cape Independence Party that really doesn't do well in any area. So you do need a political party that can appeal to the majority of people in the province.
Why is that? Why doesn't the Cape Independence Party do so well?
Well, they take quite a libertarian approach, which the Western Cape is more capitalistic than the rest of the country, but they're not libertarian. So I think that's one of the main problems with the Cape Independence Party, and also their imaging. There's many issues with their imaging. I spoke to some people who were considering voting for them prior to the local elections, and they just were quite disappointed with how the party was presenting themselves. They didn't consider it to be a serious electoral alternative, and I think they ended up voting for the DA, unfortunately. So I think it's they've got a lot of potential, but unfortunately I feel like they squander it a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've also been very disappointed by I had a conversation with Jack Miller about I mean, I'm not going to go into details because I feel like divulging too much of a private phone call would be not right. But I remember I asked him about, is there anything that you would have done differently in your campaign? And he felt that they'd just sort of tried everything. And, I kind of don't think that's true. I mean, personally, from my perspective, I think that they could work a better on a lot of optics, a lot of online presentation. They could be a bit tighter in their public communication on many channels. They're not good at playing the media. I mean, there's some basic stuff like mastering media packages and stuff like that they could be a bit better at. So I don't know. I don't think they have tried everything. And I think that they could do a lot better, and it's very sad because it kind of lets the movement down. But we are where we are, and I mean, it's been the biggest drag on it because you can do as many polls as you like, and I think there's a difference between stated preference and revealed preference, because everyone kind of likes the idea of Cape independence, but if they have no confidence that it's ever going to happen, they're not going to bother to take that leap, because there is a price to pay, at least in terms of risk. It's the one of saying, well, I mean, I could try and do this whole Cape independence thing, but it could also be a lark. And the DA then takes a hit, and they get closer to negotiating with parties that I don't want anything to do with.
But on that point,
that's the trade-off everyone's making.
Shouldn't you sell it like Courtney Mulder is doing? That's saying there's nothing to lose by doing it either way. You can.
That's true.
Fight for South Africa.
But I mean, again,
independence.
No, that's 100% true. I mean, the thing is, there's always a rational argument you can make. I mean, I can point out reality all I like, but it's getting people to understand the electoral system, and to trust what is true about the electoral system rather than their gut feelings. That's a very, very difficult process. And I mean, even with one individual, never mind with people en masse. And so, I mean, I think people have to realize that there is an uphill battle, even if there is a majority that supports Cape independence, which I think there is, because I honestly can say, since I've lived in the Cape, I've met maybe one or two people in total in person that have anything negative to say about Cape independence in principle. The only objection, and the one that almost everyone has, is, yeah, but it won't happen because the ANC wouldn't let us, so then why bother? And it's difficult to convince them, actually, that's not true. Here's why. Here's a process, this, and this. Because they have to learn all of this stuff about, like, what the Constitution's like and what international law is, what the material strength of the ANC's armed forces are, what the national military looks like. And no one's got the time for that. If you sit and explain that to someone who's got zero political knowledge, or like, just normie, I prefer DA over ANC kind of knowledge, then that conversation is at least half an hour to get them up to speed on here's why Cape independence is possible. And so even if people want it to happen, it's precisely that belief that it's impossible that is preventing them from acting, even in as trivial a place as the ballot box. So, that's really the hurdle, is trying to raise awareness of the windows of opportunity.
But on that note, isn't there also the problem defeating the DA in the Western Cape also involves explaining to people all these technicalities that the DA isn't doing right. I mean, how do you sell that message that the Democratic Alliance is screwing up in the Western Cape? Because it involves.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as screwing up. I wouldn't go as far as screwing up. I think that's an important point. Look, they're doing a competent job. I don't want to go as far as to say they're doing a terrible job. They're doing a competent job. Let's not be funny. They're the best political party in the country. No one can doubt that. Anyone who's remotely rational can recognize it. But the thing is, is that good enough? Is the best we've got to offer good enough? Because I mean, the challenges that we're going to face right now as I don't want to say as a nation, because South Africa isn't a nation, but as the country, we're all going to face the fact that we are heading towards a cultural revolution amongst the black population. Okay, at the street level, you've got things like Put South Africa First. You've got the Operation Dudula. That's a very, very sort of influential movement, and you're seeing a massive transformation of broad swathes of black society in our generation towards ideas of black consciousness. And then amongst those who have university education, most of a great deal of them, I wouldn't say most because actually I have no idea what the proportion is, but there's a good proportion of people who've gone to universities, and even larger if they've gone to the elite universities, who are believers in sort of blood and soil genocidal nationalism. And, I'm talking about not just EFF supporters, but, just any kind of common garden variety, take back the land type of guy, regardless of whether they support the PAC or even the ANC Youth League are of this flavor now at the universities. Not the ANC Youth League, SASCO, same thing really, practically speaking. But I mean, like the good indicator of this shit is, when I was at UCT, it was the point where, you get people who are calling for genocide, and there's like not a single person that you can find to speak to will say that there's anything wrong with doing that. And even if that cohort has passed away and the next one are more moderate, which I'd have to go and talk to people to find out, you've got a huge cohort at a national level, because the Fallist movement was at a national level. You've got a massive cohort of young people who are going to be passing into leadership, who dominate the discourse, have nobody who's challenging them on these kinds of issues, who are dragging the whole country towards sort of a nationalist revolution of the kind that you sort of saw in Europe in the 19th century and the early 20th century. It's sort of a confrontation of who are we. And I mean, one must remember that, okay, well, South Africa is not really a nation. But then if you look back at Europe in the 19th century, those weren't nations either. They were, royal fiefdoms that encompassed several ethnicities who felt that they were fairly distinct, but didn't question the idea of who they were until the national question emerged as a violent proposition. And so we're not hitting that stage, and there's no discussion. Everyone understands that black people are inside that nation, and everyone else is a conditional member, or if you're white, completely outside of it. And that makes you a moral externality to any political violence or property appropriation that occurs in that process. And that process can last for a good couple of decades. And it's about to hit us, by the end of the decade. So what shape that will take, how fast it will move, what it'll look like, I don't know. But it's not going to be pretty, and it's going to take a lot of stuff with it, and it's going to take a lot of people down with it. And these are such slow-moving social forces. They're not things that you can slam reverse on. You can't just run a really effective political campaign and say, now, okay, guys, we're all going to get along. We're going to be fluffy internationalist liberals now. Not a bloody damn. I mean, even if you look at the moderate end of Black South African nationalism, and that's Action SA, they're the moderates, right? They're the most moderate party. Even they are fairly hardcore nationalist types. And they are not against racial discrimination at all. In fact, they think that it's fine. It just needs to be enforced better. So, what are you really dealing with here? You're dealing with a wave of change that can only be ducked. It can't be challenged because, even if every minority in the country stood together, we're too small. So
I want to bring in King here,
and
but
I think
don't know.
also, yeah.
Is he still here? But okay, sorry, Duigan.
Yeah, Robert, are you still there, man? Yeah. The real issue is the wave of black consciousness that started in the mid 20th century. It was remarked by there's a lot of very decent. I mean, even though I disagree with the guys on many points, there's a very, very decent political thinkers in the black consciousness tradition who've noted some of these trends as early as the 1970s. And I think, like Biko is certainly part of it, but I don't think he was as he wasn't as descriptive of a change as he was prescriptive of it. So he said, well, this ought to happen. But you don't get to see a real description of what's happening materially and spiritually with the nation, I think, until you get to Ngobeni. Or is it Ngobani? I haven't read the paper in a while, so I'm forgetting the man's surname.
Would you describe Operation Dadula as a black consciousness movement? Is it more of like just a vigilante organization?
No. I think one has to be careful. I don't want to say like they're literally a black consciousness movement. Like they're just a continuation of the BCP. That's not true. But they share a lot of ties with them. They're based in the core of the old BCP neighborhoods, and Biko is, as usual, highly influential. I mean, you got to remember, Biko was the ally of British and American intelligence. And so their members were tortured by the ANC for that reason, tortured and murdered en masse for that reason, even if they fled overseas.
What do you mean with ally?
Sorry,
what do you mean with ally?
Okay, well, what you can see is, I mean, there's scant records of this, but what you'll notice is that the Church of England, which overseas is often the playgrounds of MI5 and MI6 operators, that was how black consciousness was initiated, was through the Anglican Church in South Africa as a movement. And it was largely designed and orchestrated by, white bishops whose names, again, me and names. But, and then later on, the Americans got involved. So you've got, in 1975, you've got the United States Information Agency opening up a branch in Soweto in the 70s, and starting to show all kinds of propaganda to black youths in order to rile them up, and sharing ideas on how to organize and so on. So it was within a year you see the emergence of this enormous student movement. Not that it hadn't been building for some time, but it was a major step change once the Americans got involved. And if you ask any sort of old ANC cadre, the one thing that they kept going on about was that the black consciousness movement was a tool of the CIA, which is why they went out of their way to capture, torture, and convert them. If a BCP member went to the UN High Commission of Refugees when they hit Tanzania or wherever, because the ANC had infiltrated the UNHCR, by virtue of their Russian connections, what would happen is they would be picked up and they'd be sent to Camp Quattro to be reformed. So, I mean, not to say that the Americans were doing right or wrong by what they were getting involved in, but it's just that there's those dynamics as well. So there's unfinished business between those who follow black consciousness and those who follow the ANC, even though there's much overlap.
So essentially, you're saying is that Chris Wyatt is responsible for Steve Biko.
But, him personally, must be him. Sorry,
I want to bring in King back here. King,
please go ahead.
King, is there any plan to create another Cape Independence Party?
There's discussions within a number of different groups, but I don't think there's any concrete plans as of yet. And it's because, look, creating a political party is a good idea, but it's also a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it requires an immense amount of resources, an immense amount of dedicated people. And I mean, they also don't necessarily it's difficult to get a large share of the vote with new parties. I mean, take Good as an example. I mean, they got about 2 or 3% of the vote in the last elections. I mean, even take an established party like the Freedom Front Plus, and they only got 3% of the vote. The EFF got 4%. So it's very difficult to make a breakthrough, and it takes a lot of resources. So I think we will see one emerge, but it will require dedicated people to bring it through. And look, I think, regardless of whether a new party is launched, I think with the people that are currently prepared to vote for pro-independence parties, I think we will see the DA go below 50% in the next elections in the province. Speaking to Freedom Front Plus members, they seem very optimistic about the possibility of the DA going below 50% and having to go into coalition with them. But we don't want to just base this on optimism, and we actually want to make this a certainty. And I think a new party would ensure that.
You're a member now of the Vryheidsfront Plus. Do you think they're doing enough in the Western Cape to convince voters to their side? Has Peter Groenewald ever been in a township?
I'm not that sure about Peter Groenewald. I mean, like I've campaigned with Peter Murray, for example, in the townships of the Riebeek Valley. So I've been campaigning there. I think they are doing a lot, but there is a number of challenges with them. Firstly, I mean, they are a minority party. They are a party that has a key focus on Afrikaans-based minorities, which means that they probably have the best opportunities in the Western Cape. I mean, this is the only majority Afrikaans-speaking province as far as I know. But at the same time, they've got that baggage of the Freedom Front Plus. They've got the baggage of the 90s, and that's always going to, be a problem for them. So I support the Freedom Front Plus personally, but I don't think they are going to be the primary political vehicle to drive Cape independence forward. I think we do need a purpose-built political party that can appeal to a large chunk of the Western Cape population. I think the Freedom Front Plus will do a great job at appealing to voters in the rural parts of the province. But I think especially in the city of Cape Town, you're going to need a new vehicle there.
Yeah, that's true.
And should this party be led by a white person, a colored person, a black person? Does it matter if it's a white person, a colored person, or a black person? Does race matter?
I think look, race always matters in politics. Identity always matters. There's no avoiding it. But I think that in this particular case, even if it's a white person leading it, you can make certain allowances. You'll make certain allowances to like, for example, you could say the party will dissolve itself once the referendum is held, or once secession is achieved, and that'll go a long way to mitigating some of the distrust involved. But I mean, it's going to be whoever is actually ready to do it. I hope you don't mind if I just quickly address a couple of comments in the comment thing, because I can be very quick.
Go ahead.
Just because Chris Wyatt's a very sort of reputable man, and him his little comment about what I said about the Black Consciousness movement, I thought I'd quickly address, because the thing is, like, I also thought it was absurd. But I actually got pointed to this by someone. He pointed to sort of actual original documents. So I found that you can actually find online. So I found the budget hearing for the U.S. Information Agency for 1975, and then there was a U.S. Information Agency retrospective that mentioned the reading room that they had in Soweto. And then I read a couple of memos of people who worked with them from the 1970s who mentioned the propaganda process that they exposed the people to on the ground. So coupled with the comments from, sort of old, from the sources used by Anthea Jeffrey to describe the process of persecution between the two groups, I sort of figured that there's enough corroboration for it to basically be true. That's what I sort of reached. And then the flip-flopping in terms of American foreign policy, I kind of understand it because of different departments that behave differently. And America, like everyone else, really wanted South Africa to break open and release a lot of its assets to international investment. And America's reason for tolerating the South African regime is largely as a bulwark against the Soviets. And the Soviets only became a threat between 1979 and until the Soviet Union devolved. In South Africa, they only became a pertinent power in South Africa from 1979. So that whole period beforehand, you're going to see you saw a lot of funny, multi-dimensional involvement from foreigners towards civil liberties groups. And then the other comment briefly about, why is Biko's Pan-Africanist movement becoming, nationalist over here? Well, it's not actually much of a it's not much of a development. You don't have to. Most people understand that you don't have to be purely doctrinaire about things, and people who don't go to university and learn sort of rigorous ideological formulae tend to think much more pragmatically about their influences. So you can be as influenced by Biko as you want, and then you just go, well, we've also got this very sort of obvious practical problem of foreigners in front of us, and the main thing of self-sufficiency and self-determination is actually, and not involving themselves in party politics, is actually what I would see as the biggest influence there. But sorry for going off topic. I just thought I would
no
address
problem.
this quickly.
But my question is, who's funding this Operation Dadula? I mean, this what's his name, Mr. Lux? Then he is in Johannesburg. Then he is in Cape Town. Then he is in Durban. The next day, I mean, this guy is flying around, and every day he's on ENCA. I mean, it feels to me there's some money behind this. Or am I crazy?
Well, then there might be. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe maybe the ANC's funneling some money there to try and because I think Operation Dadula does a fantastic job at almost distracting from a lot of the ANC's failures. I mean, it's quite easy to put a lot of these issues, just blame them on immigration and not on the disastrous economic policy of the ANC over the last few decades. So and I think Mr. Lux has said himself that they have got ministers that they talk to. So I'm not sure. I don't want to spread any conspiracies, but
I'm sure. Look, I agree. I agree with you. It's it's hard to tell, but I mean, I think I think the big thing with Nhlanhla Lux is I'm sure there are several people who've thrown money at him, and I don't just mean the ANC. Like if you're an influential political mover and shaker in South Africa, and you look like you're going to change the status quo, people are going to approach you and try and offer you a few things. And I think I just looking at his social media, because when he first popped up, I was quite surprised, that there was something as new and fresh as him popping along. So, I listened to interviews about his life story, and I listened to interviews about what he said about his intellectual influences, his social influences, and I mean, his father was a very powerful and wealthy gangster. So he understands, and he said he learned a lot from him. So there's a lot of that sort of very streetwise approach to things, and he's very, very good at networking. So you'll see who he appears on. He'll appear with Rob Hasselhoff. He'll appear with wealthy members of the Jewish community. He'll appear with wealthy members of the Afrikaner community. He will appear with politicians from all sides of the divide. The only people he really doesn't like now are the EFF. But you'll notice that until they had that clash over the drug dealing, they were actually very friendly, and he would congratulate Julius Malema on every sort of thing.
I saw an interview with done with him on Hustler's Corner. It's a YouTube podcast. And in that interview, he said there was a point in time where he literally verbatim memorized Julius Malema's speeches. He literally, and he was part of a group that, he was clearly a massive fan of Julius Malema. I don't know if that's still true to this very day, or if this entire immigration thing made them fall out, but there's definitely something there.
Well, I mean, you'll notice that, look, Julius Malema was for open borders and Pan-Africanism, which anybody with an ounce of sense can tell is a stupid idea. But he was for it right up until the point that it became a liability for his electoral sort of success. And then he said, and then he started pulling those stunts with, restaurant owners. How many, foreigners are you employing and all that? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But I think, oh sure, but I just pulled a blank. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. I floated away.
No problem. But gentlemen, it's 8:00. Do you see hope? Do you see hope for Cape independence? Do you see something happening in the future that's actually going to really make this happen? King?
Look, I'm quite optimistic. I'm a bit like Phil. I mean, he's always quite optimistic about Cape independence, and I share that. Look, I think there's a lot of things that are in behind the scenes at the moment going on that will really change the dynamics of Cape independence and really bring this more into becoming a reality. But yeah, I definitely think there's reasons to be optimistic for this. The Cape has a lot of potential. It's got great people, and I think it's got a great future ahead of it if it decides to take this political option.
Look, I think there's an opportunity, but I think part of the problem is that almost everyone in the movement is thinking in very linear ways. And they have the idea that, and I mean, like, I've spoken to, I think, representatives from almost every different movement at one point or another. And the thing is that everyone in the movement has their own sort of plan of this is how we get Cape independence, and all of those plans are different, and no one has any interest in really compromising. And so, I mean, Phil Craig's got he's got the best, I would say, just objectively, he's the most skilled at this. He's the most pragmatic. He's the most dynamic. He's the best at maintaining and developing contacts with influential members. He's very good at public communication. All of these things, none of these things can be said for any of the other people in the movement to the extent that it's true of Phil Craig. However, I do suspect that he is slightly too optimistic about sorry, that's my dog moaning there. I do suspect that he's slightly too optimistic about the DA's willingness to collaborate. That's all I would say, really. I think the DA are very reluctant, and they don't really want to do this because they're looking at that big shiny union buildings in Pretoria and hoping to get a seat up there. So yeah.
I want to throw it up to the people still watching this. You can deliver a question that I'll ask. The last question, the last words. Give it to us and I'll ask it. But in the meantime, just quickly, what do you see the future for the Democratic Alliance? Okay, so King, you've said that. Do you believe that the Democratic Alliance will achieve 50% in the next election? Do you think they will be pushed into a coalition government?
I think in the Western Cape, if we just look at the trends, I think it's almost inevitable that they will go below 50%. How much they go below 50%, I think is still up for debate. But I think if we look at the last election results for pro-independence parties, parties that explicitly supported Cape independence went from about 0.1% of the vote to about 5% of the vote overall. So I think if we're able to keep the momentum going into 2024, I think in conjunction with a number of other anti-independence parties as well, that will be eating into the DA vote base, I think we will be seeing the DA go below 50%. And I think it's also going to be a bleak picture in the rest of the country for them. Although I think Action SA probably is going to do very well in Gauteng, eating into their vote base there. I don't think they're going to do very well in the rest of the country. I think they're probably going to underperform quite significantly. If we look at the local election results, for example, in Durban, they only got about 2% of the vote. But I think we're going to see the DA lose the official opposition role in a large number of provinces in 2024. I think the EFF is going to continue to be the second largest party in most of the north of the country, northwest, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga. And I think Action SA is probably going to, I don't know if they're going to become the second largest party in Gauteng, but they're certainly going to be the third largest there. And I think we're going to see the IFP continue to make gains in KZN. So that's my expectations for the DA. It's not optimistic in the Western Cape, and it's not optimistic in the rest of the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Robert King has said is largely true. But I think my perspective is always the long-term one. And what I would say to anyone in the DA or anyone supporting the DA at this point, instead of supporting something like Cape Independence or what have you, it's what is the future of South Africa? And I think the concrete answer to that is that we've already seen a little taste of it in Nelson Mandela Bay. Nelson Mandela Bay, a couple of local elections ago, the ANC managed to get 46% against the ANC's 39%. and they formed a coalition with a couple of little parties, and they got in charge. And this lasted for a little while. And in the meantime, the ANC and the EFF and the unions and the civil servants drained the public coffers, sabotaged all of the public infrastructure, and made sure that during the DA's tenure, it was not possible to it was not at all possible to govern properly. They made the city ungovernable, destroyed it after already having looted it for years. And when the election came around again, the DA couldn't maintain their. The DA could not maintain their lead over the ANC anymore. They sank down to parity, 39-39, and the ANC got back in charge by bribing the Patriotic Alliance into participating. So what you really see over there is what it's going to look like at a national level, except that at a national level there are way higher stakes. And as we can see, political assassinations have started bleeding out of the Charterist movement and into opposition parties. They tried to assassinate a DA councillor in KZN recently. And so what politics is going to look like is going to be increasingly desperate, increasingly violent, increasingly messy, increasingly corrupt, and extremely unstable. Because coalitions, they only take two forms: highly unstable or stable and corrupt. And what it's going to mean is that the long-term version of South Africa is going to be an extremely horrible, horrible place to live that only has a downward spiral ahead of it. Unless there's a major revolution that delivers a completely different political dispensation.
I would like to just develop on that because I think Shwane is probably going to end up being the next Nelson Mandela Bay. I mentioned this to Donald just before we went live. The coalition there seems to be in complete chaos at the moment because they're in government, but they're not in power in that city. I mean, some of the councillors I'm speaking to literally have to have police protection because of the threats of violence they receive from members of, in particular, I think the EFF. And we see this, even Freedom Front Plus councillors now, across the north of the country, are facing threats to their lives, and that's the seriousness of the situation we're getting. And when it goes national, it's going to be, it's going to go nuclear pretty much.
Yeah, and I mean the DA just do not have what it takes to govern with that kind of power politics. The only and it's just not possible. And the thing is that in the meantime, even if you think that you could build a coalition to do something positive, what have the DA been doing for the past couple of months? They've been aggressively trashing every single anti-charterist party there is. Like, we are the only party. Everyone must vote for us. All of you are ungrateful little swine. How dare you speak up against us? And it's the stupidest public communication strategy that any party has ever engaged in. Not because it's the most inept or crazy, but because of the stakes involved. The stakes are absolutely existential for the country. And they're sitting here going, yes, but you have to stick finely to our plan and never consider criticizing us. There's no tolerance that the DA has for any criticism, except unlike the ANC and the EFF, they don't have the balls to make people shut up. So what they do is they just whine and piss everyone off. And this is destroying their chances, their potential for building a working anti-charterist coalition for 2024, because they have that big shiny option of becoming the ANC's little appendix.
Who are they in the DA? Is it Helen Zille? Is it John Steiner? Is it everyone?
Look, Zilla's been very aggressive in attacking the smaller parties. The others have been much more much more measured and mild. But they've all taken the same position that voting for a small party is bad. And if you're voting for a small party, you're hurting the country. And, that kind of maternal figure wagging doesn't go down with anybody. And frankly, The Freedom Front Plus, sorry?
Oh, yeah, they take almost a completely different stance. I mean, they openly talk about how we need to have a variety of parties in the run-up to in the next elections that can, take over South Africa.
Of course, they say that, King. They're one of those minor parties. They want people to vote for them.
Oh, well, I think they also recognise, though, that they're not a party that can really appeal to every demographic in South Africa. I think the DA views themselves as a party that wants to appeal to every demographic. I think the FF Plus knows who their voters are going to be, and they know that they're not going to be that they're going to be a component of this. They can't be the only component of this. I think the DA might have a different strategy to that.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's a no-brainer. You do Cape Independence, or you watch the entire country, all 9 provinces, go down the toilet, never to be resuscitated. And I think that the reluctance to engage with Cape Independence it's absurdly suicidal for anyone who's part of a racial minority. And even if you're a black member of the Cape, you're not winning anything by sticking to South Africa. This is a political institution that was created to subjugate you. Do you really think that it's something to hold on to? It's absurd. I don't know how anyone can back the idea of South Africa continuing. It's the most absurd political contrivance on the planet.
Okay, it seems like the audience isn't delivering a question. They're too busy battling each other. So I'm going to give the question. Patrick, Gayton McKenzie, the Patriotic Alliance. What do you guys think of his future? Because I recently saw an interview with Rob Hershoff, and he says this guy is doing amazing work. And
Rob Hershoff has never had one positive or bright political instinct his entire life. He consistently blacks the wrong answer every single. He's incapable. I wouldn't take money from him if he offered it with a rap bow, because I wouldn't know what would happen if he did it. I mean, think about who he thought the hero of the country was, and just a couple of months ago, he thought it was Musi Maimane. I mean, if that's not a joke to you, I mean, come on. So, look, Gayton McKenzie is extremely shrewd, but he's a shrewd gangster. His entire party is staffed by former gangsters. He when he walks into a negotiation, the only thing that he asks from his coalition partners is, what are you going to give me? I want these departments, the ones that have the juiciest tenders. What has he been doing now that he's in charge of what municipalities? Do you remember, Robert?
Central Karoo.
Central Karoo
district.
Well, I have no idea what's going on there, but it seems fishy as hell that the first thing that he's done is earmarked a shed load of municipal money for capital initiatives for small companies. Now, they look very sexy, and frankly, I'm the kind of person who loves the idea of cutting with the rules and doing something as creative as that. But knowing how Gayton McKenzie has squandered millions in his life that he's received from various, and I mean, he claims to be a reformed gangster, but most of his dodgy shenanigans have happened since he's so reformed. So, I mean, look, he's an extremely intelligent guy. He's clearly a very tough individual. But anyone who's dealt with him sees him as a two-faced, unreliable, lying, slippery fish. And I don't think that he has any longevity as a political leader. I think that whatever he's doing at the moment, I can't see it lasting. And I have no idea if anyone's going to benefit. I really hope that even if he's squandering the money from Central Karoo, that those little startups that he's kicked for, brick production and, whatever he's doing, will outlive what he's done to the budget. But, I don't know. And I wouldn't want to go into business with him. He doesn't seem very trustworthy.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of him as well. I mean, I'm wondering, because every day on Twitter you'll see a new post from Gayton McKenzie about what he's doing in the Central Karoo district. But I just don't know if it's him being very social media savvy with this. I mean, because it's some very basic functions like opening up a pool or turning a pool pump on, and he'll be recording that and showing how successful he is. And I think if we look at the results from the general Karoo municipalities,
in South Africa, that can be very successful.
Yeah, I mean, look, a water pump is a major success for a government. So, just a water tap is a success. But if we look at the by-election results,
our standards are so low.
Results, yeah, I mean, that's so when the DA celebrates their amazing accomplishments, they're comparing it to that. which isn't anything really. It's nothing compared with the rest of the world. But if we look at the by-election results coming in from the Kuru now, not the central Kuru, but just the Kuru in general, Matsukama municipality, which is on the border there next to the coast, there was a by-election in a PA-held ward where the incumbent defected to the DA because he didn't want to join an ANC coalition. And the PA vote share went from 27% of the vote there to about 6% of the vote. So I don't know if that's necessarily what's going to happen in the rest of the Kuru, but it's certainly there. It seems like the shine of the PA is certainly gone.
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say one thing to be remembered about the PA is that they were the coalition partners of the DA Nelson Mandela Bay that collapsed the coalition over there. So, I think anyone who's in bed with them had better watch out, because the highest bidder will take them for a ride.
Well, they've done that to a number of coalitions with the DA in the Western Cape.
And I mean, originally they worked with the ANC, if I'm not mistaken. And their first...
They work with both.
Yeah, and they work with anyone. But gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been quite an experiment. My focus was a bit everywhere because I had to read the comments and everything. But thank you so much for this. This has been very interesting. To our viewers, I mean, if you like this, we're definitely going to do this more often. So stay tuned. Like this video, share it. And yeah, thank you very much. I assume I just click in broadcast.